Hey, I'm back at it again. I got another Pendulum replay. This time, the match is one that goes a bit longer, and I think it had a really cool... My opponent had a pretty cool deck, one that I haven't seen on Ranked before, and I think we had a good kind of back and forth. I think this is like a good match to showcase. So I'm going to start off, and I start off with a lure. I believe my opponent won the coin flip and chose to go second, so I'm kind of hoping that they don't have a really aggressive hand trap lineup, and I wanted to bait an Ash there so that when I activate my Astrograph Sorcerer, they wouldn't have one. Now, they didn't actually have interaction on that, so I know that they don't have an Ash. They do have interaction now, though, which signals to me that they have a DD Crow. And that DD Crow is not going to be doing a ton against Pendulum, but there's a few points where it could matter. So I am going to keep it in mind. With Electromite, since I already have the Astrograph in my extra deck, which is normally what I would add there, I'm going to add the Harmonizing instead, which is a key piece that I was missing. I could have used the Wisdom Eye to go into Harmonizing so that I could pop it with Electromite, but doing it this way is also good. Really what I should have done... Or, well, we'll get to it, but what I really should have done was get a double Iris into rotation. But for some reason in my head, when I was at this point where I have the Wisdom Eyes in hand and I can add anything, I think that the double Iris is already in my face-up extra. Like, I thought that I had Wisdom Eyed earlier for a double Iris and then popped it with the Electromite. So I go and I grab Black Fang instead. That is just a mistake. I realized that when I'm Pendulum summoning, oh, I don't have the double Iris. My initial plan was to do Pendulum Sorc along with the double Iris, then pop the double Iris with the Pendulum Sorc in order to get a time or a star graph, probably a time graph, but get one of the graphs into rotation. I don't end up being able to do this, and here I'm going to link off for a Dagda. My thought is I can go into the Dagda lock. Again, you know, I was kind of thinking about this at first with, I'm going to get a search, because I'll have, like, a Star Pendulum graph. So I'll get a search for something else. And then I did spend my normal. I spent my normal getting into the Electromite, but... I don't know, I thought I'd have options here. I really did not. So there, my opponent's going to DD Crow my Odd Eyes Absolute. That doesn't negate the effect, so I still get Vortex Dragon. I didn't realize that. I didn't ever really think about it. I knew that, like, in my head, it was, oh, when I go for the Odd Eyes Absolute, they're probably going to DD Crow it. So, you know, I need to make sure I have some other way to get a negate on board. I got the Vortex anyway. And I wasn't really expecting it, so I linked off the Dagda immediately without thinking about it. What I should have done is I could have activated Perform Pal Celestial to trigger the Dagda, get the Scythe, then I could go in to Tornado Dragon to be able to pop the Scythe. But I think this line is actually probably better. Or I guess I could have gone into this still too. Well, we'll talk about lines I could or couldn't have gone into. I go into the Selene here. Because I got rid of my Dagda and I don't have the Dagda lock available, I go, And I also don't have my Pendulum Graphs, so I think to myself, oh, that's fine, I'll make Savage Dragon. So I use the Selene to get back Astrograph Sorcerer. Selene is at 3 here, which usually she's at 3 because I have the Star Pendulum Graph up, but she's at 3 here because of that allure from earlier on, so helped me recover from that misplay. And now I'm gonna go into Borreload Savage Dragon, and I'm gonna get 2 counters. I'm always going into Appaloosa here. I don't know why I made the Savage Dragon first. I guess in my head, no, I have no idea. I was thinking maybe it would be a little bit safer, but it's really not. And Savage Dragon could have had 1 more counter on him. This won't end up mattering. I get the search for double Iris off of that Celestial Magician effect. I activated it at some point earlier when I had a Pendulum out, but it was after the Dagda when it would have been good to do that. My opponent plays Fairy Tale Luna. Luna is going to search another Luna. I let that go through because the Luna has a quick effect, and if I tried to negate that search, she could just chain the quick effect, I'm pretty sure, and then I would have to spend like a Borload negate or an Odd Eyes negate. I'd really rather just spend my Appaloosa negates on this because she can beat over Appaloosa if she wants. So the Appaloosa is not going to last for the rest of this turn is what I figure. My opponent, it turns out, has another way to get rid of my monster, and that is a Kaiju. So, you know, Kaiju's coming down. Then they drop their own Kaiju, and they activate this danger. I was not familiar with the way that the danger effects work. It turns out when they reveal the card and you do all this stuff, I guess that's a separate effect than the effect that special summons themselves here, yeah, because there's a period. I guess. Oh no, I see here. It's if the card is discarded, turn 1 Psy card your opponent controls destroy it, you can only use this effect once per turn. So I'm reading this thinking that it's all one effect. It's actually multiple effects. I did not read that properly, and I used the Appaloosa negate on this reveal, which does nothing. Just a waste of an Appaloosa negate. So, you know, let it through. I could have vortexed it, but I figured better to just save the vortex negate for something later. I don't want to, like, play into my opponent's baits, which I assumed this kind of was. They go for a bunch of Xyz plays. Now, none of these monsters activate effects, so none of them are valid targets for Odd Eyes Vortex. And they end up climbing into a 4K beater, which is pretty good. So they're going to hit over my 0 Appaloosa, and then they're going to just beat over the Vortex Dragon in battle phase. Then they're going to go into Zeus. So Zeus can wipe my board, and that's pretty bad, because Zeus wiping out my scales means that I'm going to have to scale 2 cards in hand, and then he can wipe those out, and I got to scale 2 more. So that's a pretty bad situation. Also, Zeus can wipe my board after my Pendulum summon, which is also pretty bad. So I'm going to go ahead and Curtain Raiser here. I'm just going to see if I can bait the Zeus. I cannot bait the Zeus. And they do not take this bait either, but that's okay because I have Bagooska. So now they can't Zeus because Bagooska forces everything into defense, and then things cannot activate effects when they're in defense. So now all I have to do is figure out a way to out a 3K monster without being able to attack and without having any monster effects on the board. And I've got a pretty good way to do it, and that is with Time Pendulum Graph. So Time Pendulum Graph I can search out by destroying a double Iris Magician, and then that effect activates when he's destroyed, so he's no longer on the field. So Bagooska can't like do anything about it. He's not a monster on field. It's fine. I target these two with my Pen Sorc. The Black Fang I just target because I want to get the extra search off of Pendulum Sorc to have more cards in my hand for later turns. And Black Fang is going to let me special a card from my grave. So if Black Fang hangs out in my extra monster zone, it's going to slow down what kind of Pendulum plays I can make because I need to have this open in order to either put a Link monster there and get more Pendulum zones, which at this point, I don't really have any Link monsters with good zones unless I go into Underworld Goddess. So I figure I may as well kill the Black Fang. He'll special out, Tuning Magician is the only valid target, I think. Yeah, so he'll special out Tuning Magician. And, you know, that's fine. My opponent ashed the Pen Sorc effect, but Double Iris does have a way to just pop himself as long as you have a Dark Spellcaster, I think it is. So I'm able to do that and get the Time Pendulum Graph, but this isn't ideal. If I had gotten the Pen Sorc pop, I would have been able to search stuff out to keep a scale open. Or to keep a scale up, rather. And my opponent just ends. There's nothing they have that they can do. So in an end phase, I'm going to go ahead and pop the Zeus. They try to Zeus in response. Doesn't do anything because of Bagooska. you know, the game lets you activate, you may as well, right? So now Black Fang triggers, and I'm going to get the Tuning Magician back. The Tuning Magician normally would burn me and heal my opponent, but it's not actually going to do that because Bagooska stops the effect. So now, during standby, Bagooska loses a material. That is kind of the cumulative upkeep on Bagooska. I drew probably just the worst draw. You know, I can go into access code here, but that's going to turn on my opponent's effects, and I'm not confident that a single access code is going to really put a lot of pressure on my opponent. So I just keep everything, you know, down here, keep the lock going, and my opponent is going to have to try and find an out to my Bagooska. I do know that they're on Kaiju, so I figure they probably run more than 2. They probably do have an out that they can get to eventually, and that card draw was kind of scary. They do, it does shut off, like, spells, which is pretty nice, having the Bagooska up there, but, you know, you got to do something eventually, and Bagooska's now out of material, so there I would have 1 turn left on him. And instead, I am going to opt to go into the access code. At this point, I do have the scales, so it's a little bit less crusty. And I'm going to bring out Pen Sorc. I pop 2 in order to get 2 cards in my hand, one that I can normal summon and one that I can scale. And I go ahead and I normal summon the Skull Combat Joker. My opponent earlier had revealed the Garnet for a Gamma, so I know that they're on Gamma, the Psy-frame Gear Gamma, which is a hand trap that can negate effects. I haven't been using any monster effects up till now because I have the Bagooska. The access code's effect didn't activate because I didn't have a Link monster to use as material for him. Doing this, I'm checking to see if my opponent like has the Gamma and is going to commit it. I can't remember. I think they did have interaction, so they had like something. And I'm going to go ahead and I use the Oath Dragon to get Double Iris to hand. I already Pendulum summoned, so I can't get him out here, but I'll have him for next turn. And then I just beat in. This puts a clock on my opponent. Next turn, they are dead if they don't out these cards. You know, they just need to out one of them, but still. So they go ahead and they draw some more cards. They've got this card is dead in their hand, and there comes down the Kaiju. They did have another Kaiju, but the problem is at this point, the Kaiju doesn't really out a problem card, it just keeps them alive. And it doesn't actually keep them alive, because it's actually stronger than my access code. So they have to bring out Pankratops, who specials himself since I control more monsters. And then Pankratops tributes in order to pop my card, and now they've got this other big dude that they can make, banishing a whole bunch of dudes, and then he targets a card on field and destroys it or something. He can do something. Banish extra deck, do stuff. Anyway, it's an effect I don't want to resolve, so I use the Time Pendulum Graph in order to pop him, and I get rid of my Purple Poison Magician so that I can keep my Oath Dragon online. This turn, I can scale a Magician here, and return a card to my hand, and then pend out, 1, 2, 3, plus the one from here, and I've got a lot of options, especially because I have a Harmonizing in rotation. So when I add that off the Oath Dragon, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 from here, and then the Harmonizing will add a 5th. So I'll have just like a huge board. And again, I am still wary of a hand trap, either an Ash that they might have or a Gamma. So what I do is I order my effects here with Harmonizing as Chainlink 1 and Pen Sorc as Chainlink 2. Pen Sorc is going to pop Double Iris. I do not have enough targets to pop 2 cards. Otherwise, I could have popped, I guess, the Celestial and found another Celestial. It's all whatever. The main use of this, I don't really need the search off of the Star Pendulum Graph here. I already have Lethal. But I do want to make sure that my Harmonizing resolves, because while I have Lethal, I don't have like very convincing Lethal. If my opponent gets out, something, has some kind of like Battle Fader effect, my board is just really bad. So I'm going to try and get it in a better state before I make the push. Right here, I Synchro for an Ignister Prominence. So Ignister Prominence at this point is just a beat stick. He's a guy who doesn't have an effect when he comes in. And I traded, a 0 attack and a guy who was in defense so he couldn't attack for 2850. That's pretty good. Him plus any one of these is going to deal lethal. So if my opponent can, stop a battle, it's not going to be enough. They're going to need to stop 3 battles. Now what was that off of? Oh, that was the search off of the Star Pendulum Graph. I had the harmonizing because, you know, I want to have this for next turn. I can grab something else off the Oath Dragon, or maybe my Oath Dragon gets popped, you know? So here my opponent is going to summon out their Gizmek again, and I just pop him and go in. So they did have something, but it wasn't enough. But I thought that was a really great match. I thought it was a really good showcase of how Pendulum can be kind of flexible, pivot from this like combo crazy turn 1, set up a big board of negates, into this like Pendulum graph control strategy and grind out the opponent. I think that my opponent's deck was really sick and really cool. They had like, it was a good deck for trying to out like a big negate board because they were just able to make a real big asshole. They were able to kaiju away one of my monsters, one of the big threats, and then they were able to make a Zeus in order to threaten any kind of returning play I'd have. Plus, they had more stuff in hand. You know, they didn't commit all of their resources into that Zeus. Even still, though, I think it's you know, it's hard to out a big combo board and then also survive through a big you know, grind game. A few misplays from my opponent, but I don't think they really mattered. The main thing was the DD Crow was at a really bad timing. They probably just didn't even consider like, oh, I'm gonna Selene back in Xyz material in order to get a better synchro play. And yeah, even if they had the DD Crow in hand at that point, I could have gotten someone from hand. I could have done some other stuff. So I wouldn't say necessarily a misplay, but well, it was definitely because that DD Crow did nothing. But I don't think it mattered in the end. And a couple misplays on my part as well, which again I don't think mattered in the end. But we'll say they canceled out.